My name is Joe Laloon, and welcome to the Three Phase Podcast, where myself and my guests discuss high-frequency topics and questions to shed light through expertise and experience so that you can take the information and apply it to your needs. In the last year and a half, COVID has afforded us the time to question our jobs and if we'd rather be doing something different. On today's episode, we talk about leaving a corporate job, the changes and the benefits that come out of asking the big question, should I stay or should I go? And now, the podcast.
The Three Phase Podcast is starting now.
All right, looks like we're going. Okay, so it's appropriate that my guest today is also my first guest. He has evolved with the fitness industry over the years, from athlete to personal trainer to manager and educator to owner and mentor. He's a voice for healthy living and an advocate for fitness professionals. He has done all successfully with no lack of energy to maximize his potential at each stage. You can find him on Instagram at BAFFOEMAN. Ladies and gentlemen, Nsuani Baffoe. How are you?
I gotta take you with me everywhere, Joe. That's a great introduction. Thank you, my friend. How are you?
Hey, man. I'm good. A little background on our relationship. I've probably known you for, I think now over 6 years, but you were there day one for me. First time I ever took a personal training course. It was you hosting it, and haven't looked back. You know, we've kind of fostered friendship over the years and chat on a regular basis. That's why I got you here as number one.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And it's been a pleasure to watch you grow, not only as a professional, but as a man, as a dad. It's just been really cool. I always saw you as, one of the guys that, okay, this kid's obviously highly skilled. He's a man of few words. He does his work really well. And it's almost like, being a competitive guy. You look across the field and you see that other athlete warming up. Like, I heard about that guy. I heard he's a gun. And I'm just really, really thankful to spend time with you. So appreciate the offer to be here.
Awesome, man. So I wanted to kick things off. I've picked up this quote off your Instagram from almost a year ago to the day. And you said, I am training myself to focus on long-term solutions and not short-term agitations. So how has this training served you in the last 12 months?
I'd say it took that quote that I thought was cool and put it to the test. Obviously the world is a funny place. It's still going through a lot of change. It'll probably go through change for the next 5-10 years, or at least it'll never be the same. And it's taught me to just really redirect my energy when I'm feeling a bit anxious, nervous, disappointed. Look at the bigger picture and see how the race is being run. I mean that from business and the fitness industry to all the changes going on there, to even just my household and my family. So,
yeah, absolutely. And there's been obviously a ton of challenges in the last year. It's kind of the never-ending conversation. But what were some of the bigger challenges that you ran into in the last 12 months?
I think just the indecision of like opening and closing. That was challenging because, the world asked us all to pivot, and many of us went online and found solutions either through online programming or virtual coaching. I was doing a lot of equipment rental, program design, and then you have to ask yourself, okay, that's picking up some traction. Do you slow that down, or do you continue to grow in that space, or do you bring people back inside? And just the up and down created its own challenges.
Yeah, I think that was definitely a big thing that we saw, was this sort of like adapt or die mentality. And the businesses that weren't flexible, that didn't move with the times, we sort of saw them lose momentum and start to fall off. Whereas the littler guy who was more agile and could make adjustments on the fly saw a lot of that flourish. And I know you saw some good changes, and you were one of those guys who kind of rolled with the punches and found new lanes and really went all in on them. So what were some of the things that you adjusted in this last year?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for those acknowledgement points. I think the biggest one is listening to the coaches and listening to the clients more. So when I say clients, you'll often hear me say clients. Because I manage fitness pros, I do consider them clients as well. So I'll do my best to make a designation between end user clients, like our personal training athletes or group fitness athletes or nutrition athletes or nutrition clients. And then I'm also talking about other fit pros. And, the last 12 months, I'm 39, I'm 40 in a few months. I have a lot of experience. I've been in the game a while, but this game is moving fast and it continues to move fast. So in the last 12 months, I've really been empowering my team to come with decisions. I run a lot of my strategies by them and say, what do you think? Even our marketing approach, it's less about trying to convince the client, where it's more listening to them and giving back almost what they need to hear to move forward. And I don't think I was looking at that the first part of my career. I was pretty certain that what I had to say was so important that maybe I didn't listen as much as I needed to.
Yeah, I found the same thing. I did some different things that I haven't done before. Kind of played around with like Instagram Live, and then did like an online team training scenario. And one of the things that I did at the end of that, I believe it was like a 12-week period, was I asked for feedback. I wanted to see, with this new format, how did it work for them? What were things that didn't work? What were things that I can improve on? And just being open and listening to what the, we'll say, consumer really wanted and got out of it helped me narrow down what my services should be and how I want to adapt them moving forward.
Absolutely.
What was a silver lining for you out of all of that too?
Just the growth of my own career. And I now know, again, I'm 39, I'm 40. I'm still cool enough to know, what shoes everyone's wearing. But I'm also old enough to look at spreadsheets and do some of the old school work that, a lot of people don't do anymore. So
yeah,
knowing that I'm still relatable to my staff and to my team, and knowing that they'd be able to give me good ideas and I was able to humble myself in implementing them. And then we all see the success of either, let's say, a marketing campaign or a service or a strategy or an event. That lets me know, okay, I have some legs in this game. And I also have a little more of a niche where in the next few years, specifically, as the industry continues to evolve, there's going to be more and more and more changes. I know I'm going to be a very valuable piece to the youth or the younger energy in the business, and then the older stakeholders. And then, finding ways to plug those gaps is going to be a lot of fun, but I'm confident. I'm confident after the last 12 months for sure.
Yeah, wearing Jordan 3s and crunching numbers.
You got it. Only crunching numbers in Jordan 3s. That's where I'm not doing this report unless I have more Jordans.
That's the proper footwear for that. And so you started purchasing some other gym locations, and you were mentioning, like, especially your Midtown location. You've got like 17 trainers there right now, and kind of had to shift. From personal trainer to manager, and now you're into that owner world of things, right? So what's that journey been like becoming an owner after being a manager and a successful manager for a long time, and obviously a successful personal trainer? Now you're an owner. What's that like?
Yeah, good question. It almost feels the same in some ways. Obviously, the stake in the game or the consequences are much higher because it's literally my capital, my time, and that changes for sure. But I always approach anything I ever did as an owner. I remember working at Home Depot and I'd be like, "Don't mess with our lumber. Put that lumber back. It's not my lumber." But that's kind of the way I am. If I put a jersey on, I'm on the team, right?
Right.
But it isn't my first shot of entrepreneurship. I actually started the business when I was in my teens. I had a car parts business with my best friend, David Williams. I later transferred that into an acquisition company where I'd buy college rental homes and rent them out all through college. I've always had my foot in and out between employee work and entrepreneurship, and even working at Good Life. As much as a company, it does definitely was a lot of entrepreneurship work. Right?
Yeah, man. You're the ultimate hustler.
You're hustling. Otherwise, you're not going to make it. There's definitely guidance and there's repeatable process. But at the end of the day, you're only going to go as far as the work you put in. And I like to call that time period an intrapreneur, not an entrepreneur. But to make that jump, I was studying the market for a while. I was noticing a lot of redundancies in the fitness space, meaning, you have a CrossFit on one corner of the street, and then you maybe a yoga studio, and then maybe you have like a spin studio. And, why couldn't all of these individual gyms keep their individuality, but share some fixed costs, maybe share some strategies? Restaurants do it all the time, right? Mm-hmm. I was definitely thinking, okay, there's got to be a time in the market where I can jump in, I can bring my skill sets from corporate management and my skill sets as a coach and be part of a couple teams and try to get them to work together. I thought that break in the market was going to be a real estate bubble. I didn't think it was going to be a world bubble, right?
Yeah,
But
totally.
I
Totally.
mean, one of the initial few months of COVID, when safety was the number one concern, and then what are you doing with the rest of your life? Shortly after, I was like, oh, maybe this is the time to launch a strategy. And
Mm.
I felt confident in all my years of working in corporate space that I could grow teams and drive clients, even with all the obstacles coming up. And I know that, I got a lot of leadership training in my previous jobs. And I think really what it was is let's see if we can take all of that and then get on the court and make change for the industry. So that's kind of what drove my decision. And I do a lot of the same stuff I do back when I was working for a company.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like that mindset, that growth mindset, and being flexible and being agile. I know we both of us were kind of in that same headspace, and we had talked a few times about it, and we were looking to the future in terms of like what our past jobs and experiences had taught us and where it could lead us. And yeah, you were one of the first calls that I made to talk about if I want to move on and do something individual, moving
Right.
away from the corporate environment. So in the last year, we have both left corporate settings. And yeah, like I said, you were someone I reached out to when I was really starting to consider making the move. And I've personally had a lot of people ask me for advice on subject, as I'm positive you have as well. So maybe let's talk just a bit about that transition. And
Yeah.
then what are some common questions you get, and how do you answer them typically?
Yeah, that's definitely a question I get a lot. It's a question I asked a lot too of other people and other business owners I know, from restaurateurs to tax spaces to marketing and agencies. Um, I think what it comes down to for everybody is, first of all, really get to the why. Just like anything else we do in the fitness space or anything that's going to require your time, your focus, and your resources. Get to the why. Like, why are you doing this? Are you doing this because you really want to change that, designation on your Instagram page to entrepreneur, right? Do you want to be called a boss? Well, I throw that conversation out first and foremost because no matter who you work with or who you work for, the client's always going to be your boss. So to be your own
Mm-hmm.
boss, if that's your motivation, throw that out the window. Um, I think for me, maybe it's best just talk about myself. Is you got to ask yourself, are you drawing new skills? Are you learning and are you earning? And we chat a lot about that. And now, when you kind of focus on those areas, those are my areas, by the way, but everyone should have their own. But my focus was, am I learning something new and exciting? If I'm learning something new and exciting, monetary wise, doesn't matter who I work for, who I work with, who I work by myself, that's all secondary. Because if I'm working at a company that I'm learning things that are new and exciting, and that's my focus, then that's great. Uh, since leaving the corporate world, I feel like I've learned more in the last 2 years than I have in the last 20. So
Yeah.
that's satisfied one of my needs for sure. Like just
Mm-hmm.
learning all the new things, how to negotiate a lease, how to buy equipment, how to set up a marketing campaign, how to use social platforms. Like that's just been amazing just for my longevity of my own development.
It's been a bit of a trial by fire, right? Like it's you got to figure it out with your feet moving. Things like you said, things move fast right now, and if you're not on the run doing this stuff, you're going to fall behind. So, yeah, it puts your feet to the fire and makes you learn these things really quickly. So, designating time, on a regular basis to really like meditate on different things and do the research and figure out how to learn these things quickly so that they can be applied quickly as well.
Right, right, and most importantly, that make sure that's what you want to do because monetary wise, obviously, having a business during the pandemic hasn't. I'm not buying a yacht tomorrow, right? I got a lot of work to do, but I had the time period where in my career, I need to make as much money as possible. So therefore, the strategy, who I work for, what I do I work for myself, would now answer that question. That's going to happen again in the near future. So that also made influence my decision there. But I think it's clearly knowing what stage of life you're at and what you're looking to accomplish, and then not looking at it, like I said, is it working for myself so I can have my name on the building? Sure, if that's your ultimate motivation, great, but I don't know how long that's going to last. Is it satisfying a need or your why that you have at that time? And I think that's the most crucial part that you really got to ask yourself. And I encourage people to do the same. They're like, hey, how did you know when it was time to make the jump? Well, for me, learning new skills in a new environment that I hadn't been in for some time was ultimately important. That was my reason.
Hmm.
If that's not your reason, then consider your choices, right? I think that's the most critical piece that I think everyone should take away. And if you don't know the answer to that, that's cool too.
Yeah, what one thing, like one silver lining I kind of take out of this, COVID period, and then as I said in the intro, is that it really afforded people the time to take a step back and really analyze what they're doing with their life. And for some people, that might have been, yeah, I'm doing exactly what I want to be doing. I'm totally satisfied. I'm really happy. This job isn't affected by, government shutdowns and things along those lines. Or the other side of that coin is people had the time to really realize what I'm doing is not satisfying.
Right.
I'm kind of miserable with this job. Now I'm working from home and I don't get to see the people. I don't get that, personal connection with my friends at work and stuff. And the job itself is not really what I'm looking for. It's not ticking those boxes for me. And outside of fitness as well, right, this was an opportunity for people to really sit down and think about, what is a passion of mine? Is this an opportunity for me to pivot? Is this a good time for me to leave this corporate job and go do something on my own that I can manage for myself and I'm in complete control of it? That was one of my reasons, is that, like you said, that indecision of being in and out and closed and open, it wasn't enough. Like, that didn't work for me. When I'm in
Right.
control of everything and I can control all the elements of that, that worked well for me, right?
Right.
I could grow and move at my own pace.
Right. And then you could see when we worked together, you were curious and you were, adapting at a pace that any big company can't keep up with. So now it's the energy to use to try to get us to understand. You'd show me some stuff and I'm like, that's cool. I have no idea what's going on though. Right. So it's like the energy to get, the big masses to understand it, or the energy to put in to keep forging forward. And I think that's also something you have to consider. Um, but it all comes back to, some self-reflection, as you mentioned, and really
Yeah.
understanding the psychology of money and what money means to you, because at the end of the day, we do need to be paid, and it does make a big difference for all of us. And then, also know nothing is linear, nothing is static. And just because you change and leave a corporate job doesn't mean you're out of the industry, right? It just means you're doing something else in the industry. There's 1,000 jobs in every industry. Or if you leave the industry a while, you're learning transferable or taking transferable skills with you. And I think that's the important part that we really have to, everybody should think about.
Yeah, and it's a big decision to make. With that comes a lot of stress, anxiety, worry. Right, it's a big move and can be a big move, especially if you've been in that with that company for a long period of time and you've kind of grown your roots in there. Obviously, you're learning a lot in that period too. But what are some big concerns about restarting at the bottom? That's something that you and I talked about. Is like, we're starting from scratch again. We're building a business, on a whiteboard, and there's nothing else written on that whiteboard right now. Like, we're going from the ground up. So, what are some concerns that come along with that?
Yeah, for sure. I think first is money. And I talk about money a lot because it does provide freedom and it obviously plays a big, role in our lives. And I think, again, if you look at I'm 39 years old, I look at my life cycle of what my relationship has been with money. It hasn't been linear, and it's been fluid, and it'll continue to be. So at one point in my mid to late 20s, it was how much can I rake in, and that's all I was focused on. And then all of a sudden, I have a couple of kids, and it's like, well, how can I best use my time well, and how can I be there for them in the important parts of their their career and their development. And then more now is how can I learn the skills that are going to help me to continue to earn and grow later. And that, again, I'm not looking at just for a number on a piece of paper or, what can I buy? I'm really thinking about it from the sense of what does money mean to me and how is it going to change if I make a decision with my career? Uh, and then budgeting, I've cut my salary down to almost a fifth of what I used to make. And it's also
Hmm.
seeing and showing me how much money I used to waste.
Right.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's a big part of it. But these are real conversations. These aren't gonna self-help books aren't gonna do it for you. They start for sure. Read a lot. But at the end of the day, it's you and the money, and you in the mirror rather. And it's like, are you willing to curb some habits? Are you willing to work a little harder? Are you willing to maybe walk instead of drive and do all these little things that, okay, if money is something I'm thinking about, then how can I best put myself in a position to get what I want. And then time is closely behind that. Or if it's 1-2, it's 2-1, right?
Yeah, and it's like it's an efficiency thing, right? Like how can I, maximize what I'm earning, but how can I also maximize my time? And for you and now me with a young kid too, like I want to be able to spend time at home and with the family. And when I'm, stuck in a gym or a physical location or things like that, that takes away some of that time. So that was a big thing for me too. It also not only, found the right mix of earning and spending, but also helped me find the right mix of, being at home and still being able to do my workouts, train my clients and all that kind of stuff. So, when I looked at it that way, I think after maybe first or second conversation that we had, it started to make more sense. Things became a lot more clear in terms of what was a priority for me, what really mattered for me, how much weight do I want to put on each of those things, and what were some other things that I can, move to the wayside and maybe put off for later or just eliminate from my lifestyle altogether.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And it comes down to those honest conversations. And also, I mean, one way I look at it too is I want to be around at a certain stage of my kid's life, which means I might have to sacrifice that now. I mean, look, I'm a gym owner, I'm a business owner, a brick and mortar owner. Some days I'm doing podcasts with really cool people. Other days I'm doing sales calls. Other days I have to clean the toilet and I'm doing laundry. And, those are days where my ego has to make sure I understand I'm doing this now so it's done right. And at a certain point in the business, I can hire somebody to do it right. And then I can hire or develop that person to the point where they understand not just doing it right, but also how to improve that role. And that improvement of the role is going to give that person autonomy and ownership and a sense of worth in the business. And then I won't need to be there.
Yeah.
And if that takes 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, it's worth the sacrifice because now I can get that time back from what I'm losing now.
That's essentially something you've done your whole career, right? Or like whether you were an athlete and you're training up the new rookie on the team to take over your role, or you're a manager, bringing interns in and teaching them to a point where they're self-sufficient. And now you're just applying that same skill to your new job, which has different type of employment in it, right? Like it has custodians and it has bookkeepers and those kind of things, but you're still doing the same stuff, right? Of teaching autonomy.
You got it. You got it. And if I have to, lose some time now in order to get it later, that's where the underlining effect comes in. It's not going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 linear, right?
Yeah, I think, and for me too, on that side, it was also just having that conversation with myself, but realizing there are things that I can outsource, right? I don't have to do every detail of, building a business on my own. So you can outsource marketing and you can outsource, logo design and,
exactly.
Platforms and use those things to your advantage so that you're not working a 90-hour week and then, sleeping for 12 hours and then that's it. That's all you get all week. Like we're talking about being efficient. So using resources that are available to you. And that's probably something that is, if we tried to do this probably even 10 years ago, it would have been sufficiently harder because you're literally, crunching your own numbers and you're making your own logos and you're doing every element of it. Now there are resources that allow us to, be more efficient with our time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a lot of the things you spoke of, you can start now without even making the jump. And maybe you never make the jump. Maybe you just become a really good employee because you're learning all these things now that you can bring into your role. I think that's the key. The role, the title, the name behind, or the words behind my name doesn't matter. Ultimately, my kids and my wife are my boss anyway. I'm always going to work for them and they get all my money anyway. So it doesn't matter what my title is and, where I hang my coat, what hook it's on. Somewhat, yeah, but I always look at it as I am a soldier, and my soldier and my mission is to learn new things. And when I learn those new things, pass them on and teach and develop people under them, it really becomes much, it's less sexier like that.
Yeah.
But it's easier to win. Yeah, it's a little more binary and it's a little more repeatable, and eventually it becomes a little more consistent. And then I think that's the way business grows, right?
For sure. Yeah. The clearer the picture, the easier it is to draw it out. One question I get a lot about, and one thing that we had talked about at one point too, was leaving money on the table and really just trying to wrap your head around that. So, whether you have like clients up for renewal in the fitness industry specifically, or, with other jobs, if you've got a bonus coming up or maybe an allowance that you wanted to use, but you're not going to have enough time to do that, like benefits, vacation, all that kind of stuff. So how do you wrap your head around that? Do you remember that conversation we had in terms of like when do you just draw the line and exit out the left door?
Yeah, and I think that's an amazing question, Joe. And I want to be very clear on that because I know a lot of our former colleagues will watch this. Hopefully, they will. Don't ever put good money after bad. And what I mean by that is, I know for a lot of people over the years moving off and doing their own thing, there was a bit of a distorted view in terms of how their career was built. Look, if you work for a big box company or if you work for anybody, someone took a chance on you, someone invested in you, somebody put time into marketing strategies and pens and equipment and contracts to get you to the point where you were in front of a client and that person now entrusts you with your craft. It's a team. It's a teamwork effect, right? When it's time for that to break off, make it as clean as possible. In the past, my experience working with people who had more of a predatory type approach, or would say, "I'm only going to work somewhere to get some clients and go." Business is karma, and karma is life, and at the end of the day, that's going to come back to you. So at some point, you're going to leave some money on the table. A long answer to your short question, but I really want to make sure it's clear. At some point, you're going to leave some money on the table. If you leave it in the right way, it'll grow and it'll compound. Anytime I've seen people do things backhandedly or do things just because of the money, it tends to go the other way. It tends to constrict. So you got to give yourself a bit of a budgeting. You got to budget. You got to know your why, and then you have to make good decisions based on what's good for everybody. Your clients, so if there's renewals, hey, maybe that person just finishes up with another trainer, and when they're free and clear from your time period of non-compete or whatever is binded by your legal structure that you signed, then hit that person up. If you did a good job with them, they went to another trainer or coach that you recommended, that person had integrity and did a good job with them, that's a win-win all around. And then they end up finding you again or doing dual services. Right? There's so much people who are not in shape that we don't need to have those type of questions or conversations in a negative way.
Yeah,
right?
I think reducing the pressure on thinking this is going to be like a net loss or something like that. I heard this quote that if you chase money, it will run.
It runs fast. And I actually watched a few trainers about 6 years ago. They decided to move off on their own. All super talented trainers, all coaches I'd spend my money with. And they spent so much time trying to harvest their book of business and get the most out of their time before they left with allowances and all that all that energy didn't go into them penetrating the market where they would have done very well because they're that talented. So at some point you got to say, all right, I have 5 hours today. Do I need to go this way with my 5 hours, or I'm trying to go forward with my 5 hours?
Instead of spreading yourself thin and burning out, trying to maximize something that is already finite, actually, just redirecting the energy into something that is going to move your business forward. And I always like that idea. It's something to ask myself every single day. How am I moving my business forward? You can guess based on who's on the call where I got that idea from. I heard that very early on and it stuck with me. And to this day, it is something I ask myself every single day. How am I moving my business forward? And I think that has served me, extremely well.
Absolutely.
Now that you have kind of like where you're a manager of locations and also managing trainers, and we're moving away from this corporate environment now, how does your management, your advice, guidance differ from the previous corporate world that we were in?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'll see if I can make a good analogy and hopefully this lands. Like, think about NSYNC. I'll use NSYNC.
Right,
the 5, 6 guys. There was a moment when Justin Timberlake and JC Chavez said, "Screw this, I'm going on my own," right? And I would liken the energy that they must have felt the first time they stepped on stage and went to go sing by myself. Right? Like before I had the group, and maybe you look around and be like, I'm better than Joy Fatone. That guy's not so good. But shit, they were together. They were part of something. And now I just say, hey, I'm on my own. So every single time, Joe, if I have a meeting, I have an event, I have a T&D, I have a workshop, I literally think no one's coming.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there and like, well, if my trainers don't show up, they're all contractors. I can't write somebody up. I can't penalize them. I can't hold back a promotion. If they're coming to what I'm offering, it's because they want to be there. Yeah. And the funny thing is, I always get butterflies, just like I'm stepping on the football field. And I always think, okay, was that, as good as it could be? I just had one today before I got on with you. And in my mind, I'm saying, oh, you didn't say this and you didn't do that. And, you know, I think what I'm basically trying to say is it's putting my leadership in a space where it's going to be real or not. It's going to be like effective or not. There's no contracts binding you. There's no, if you don't show up, you get a mark on your record or we dock you, you know, star
Right.
points, you know,
Right. No more gold
it's
stars for
literally,
you.
right. It's literally, I'm with a bunch of business owners who are busy, who need to do well in life and do well in their business. And I'm asking for their time.
Do you think the difference is when they're not contracted like that is that if they're showing up, they care?
They care. And even as we're saying that now, that was actually never even my issue when I was in a corporate space. No one did
Mm-hmm.
things because of, well, a couple of goons here and there. You know, you have to be like, your, you know, contract says be at that meeting. But I think
Sure.
as you alluded to, most people came or most people listened because there was something good there. And I try my best just to think about that. How can I take time from you, whether you're contracted to be there or not? And how
Yeah,
can I make sure
exactly.
I give you something that you can use, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that continued education and growth mindset is not universal, but for people that you and I work with, it tends to be like the people you see who are successful. They do have that growth mindset. They want to be curious. They ask great questions. You know, they
Right.
dig in and they take courses, and they do all the stuff you need to do to be great at your job. And that goes without saying. Like with whether it's fitness industry or any other industry, someone who's willing to grow, which now is sort of a necessity in exactly what we're talking about. You need to be willing to grow and change in order to be successful. So we're seeing a
Right.
lot more of that.
Right. I think it's important that what you just said there, it's very insightful. I think that might be a marker for somebody who's considering if it's the right time for them. Like if you're doing those things, if you're thirsting knowledge, if you're literally saying, hey, I only got 10 minutes, but I'm going to spend 5 listening to a podcast, maybe listen to something like this. Like, hey, I don't know those guys well. I didn't like Nsuani, but I think that this topic has some good food in it for me. And you do those things. I think that's just giving you more steam or more validation that whatever that idea is in your head that you know is a good idea, like push for it a bit because
Yeah.
you're doing
Yeah.
those things, right? And yeah, I guess what I'm really trying to stress is that if you're doing well in any environment for any company, look at those things that are helping you do them. Be very clear on what they are and keep recreating them. I love talking to you. I love talking to you when we had the same workspace. I love talking to you now that you're a million miles away. I,
Mm-hmm.
I love learning from you. I read everything you post. That hasn't changed. Who cares that we don't, all work for the same place anymore? I mean, that's irrelevant.
Sure.
You've given me
Yeah.
things that literally put money in my pocket based on a thought you had, right? And I think if we continue to look at our industry that way and kind of remove who do you work for or what style of training, like remove those little buckets and hats we get into, then you have a bigger pool of people just doing good work.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's been about 18 months, right? Since you've kind of broken off, started your own thing. About the same for me. The other question I get a lot is how are you feeling being on your own?
Yeah, some days I feel like the smartest man in the world. Some days I feel like the biggest idiot in the world. It all depends on what bills are due that day.
Right.
Um, but that's why I don't get caught up too much in motion. Some days I'm hungry, some days I'm not. Some days I think I need to eat salty chips and really I need to drink some water, right? And
Yeah.
I go back to those like hard variables, like what's important to me, learning new skills. What's important to me, growing in the next 3 to 5 years plus. That's going to make me even more valuable to my industry. And then, testing out these ideas that I know can work and I know can happen. So on those days, yeah, I feel really, really confident. When you don't see the outcome right away, then some days you don't feel as good. Um, yeah,
Definitely more swings, right? Like I think for me, there's more swings between, feeling super dialed in and then like a rock star and days where it's just like it doesn't feel like anything can really go right.
nothing's going right.
Um, like for me, I fall back on structure and I fall back on habits, and I
Right.
kind of have figured out over a period of time things that work really well for me. One thing I do every day is I have a notebook and I write down everything I need to accomplish on the day, and I make sure by the end of the day I've checked all those things off. And that structure helps me stay on task and feel locked in and in that kind of rock star mentality. What are some things for you that really just help you stay dialed in and in the groove and feel like you're making carrying momentum and making progress every day?
Yeah, this is a really good question. And I also agree. I watched you do that, and it's something that I am very impressed by because it's not my strong suit. I'm more of a rhythmic person. I hit my points throughout the day, but it's never like one, two, three, four, five. But, it's something I've learned and I've incorporated more of, like put those little notes in between your notes. But to answer your question specifically, I think this is why I never left the floor. Even back wherever I worked with, I always put a few hours in a week coaching. And the reason for that, selfishly, it gives me my instant gratification. When I can improve a lift with a client in the middle
Mm-hmm.
of our working sets, and not only does it, look better from my eye, they feel better, and
Yeah.
everybody's like, yeah, that worked. That gives me a little feedback loop. It's a small one. It's important to the
Yeah.
client, but now that gives me a little confidence in something that I'm working on that may take more like a 5 or 6 or 10 month strategy. And I think
Mm-hmm.
why that's really important is the second I knew I was stepping away from my corporate job, I knew I had to go straight to the floor. I knew I had to go up my hours as an actual coach because I had dropped maybe 5 hours at that point, and I went right back up to 30. And
Mm-hmm.
I needed to get that confidence back that, for lack of a better word, like I'm valuable. And now I knew that, okay, now let's structure an acquisition of a gym in the middle of a pandemic. That's not a 1 hour conversation.
No.
And that's one with massive swings of emotions and even direction. Like you said, there's structure, you work on it every day. But then there's also, okay, today was a bad day, but you know what? I had a great session today with Mara. And that
Mm-hmm.
reminded me that you know what you're doing, keep going.
It's finding your
Yeah,
anchors too. I like that
yeah,
idea
absolutely.
too,
That's
right?
an
It's like,
anchor.
right, coaching or getting your workout in, or things that you can repeatedly do, on a day-to-day basis. That's going to give confidence up. I like the idea of like the dopamine loop it may have a negative connotation, but for me in that list is crossing that list off gives me that little nice dopamine hit that makes me feel good, and it makes me want to do it more. And for
Absolutely.
for you, like you're saying, is when you step on the floor and you coach someone and improve their squat or some position, and they feel good about it. You get that little positive hit, and then you want to keep doing more of that. And the negative connotation is when people do that, towards things that don't help them. But what we're trying to do and talk about is things that are finding those positives and then continuing to do them, so you get that positive feedback loop in the right direction.
Yeah, and to add to that specific in this conversation, it's also becomes a negative when you get stuck in that loop. And I've studied a lot of different businesses in my approach to acquire, and you can see a very clear distinction between there's some people who built beautiful gyms and never got on the floor as coaches. Maybe they weren't really coaches to begin with. Maybe they didn't
Mm-hmm.
spend enough time there. And then there's other ones who spend too much time there. And as things need to be done that required more time, maybe more research, maybe those challenging things, they stayed in those dopamine loops. Like they kept coaching classes. Coaching classes is an
Right.
awesome feeling. You feel like a rock star, especially if it's like 15 people that you've never met before. And now they're
Mm-hmm.
vibing to your playlist and they're moving to your cues and they stay back and be like, whoa, that was a great class. That is dopamine high of all highs. But it
Yeah.
doesn't mean the counting doesn't have to be done, right?
Yeah.
And I've
Yeah.
noticed just examining businesses that when you get stuck there and be like, shoot, the world's crumbling. I got to go and drive this part of my business, but it's uncomfortable and there's going to be uncertainty. Let me go do what I'm comfortable doing and receive that quick high.
Mm-hmm.
That's also going to cause you trouble.
Yeah, and I think that relates back to, what we said early on of like being agile and being flexible and ready to move is those big businesses like that loop because it worked for a really long period of time,
Really
and
long
they
time.
the dollar signs kept popping up and it was working. But as soon as something, obviously this is a weird situation, but there was no opportunity to shift and look broader and find other lanes and things to move into.
Really though, I mean, really, it's like the knock got louder, right? Like we all knew, every single coach
Mm-hmm.
here knew that online training was moving, and we
Yeah.
run into people in the gym and say, "Hey, man, good squat, man. Are you interested in working with me?" And that person, even 10 years ago, would say, "No, no, I have an online coach. It's going really well." And
Mm-hmm.
the ego would be like, "Oh, that's stupid." The best way to
Yeah.
get in shape is yeah. And even though I've had online coaches for the last like 7 years,
Yeah.
right? I work with Chris Fudge, I work with Chris Lopez, I work with Jamie Snow. I'm paying them to do online coaching with my
Yeah.
programming, but I'm still, in my business being like, well, that'll never catch on, right? And that's just the ego. So COVID went,
Yeah.
hmm.
And I think now with like the resources we have, but for me, my goal with online coaching is to make it as close to in-person training as possible. And we can pretty well do that. Like the gaps are fairly closed. And, I've got clients basically across Canada and through the US, and would love to, work with clients in Europe and stuff like that too. But we can do that now because we have the resources to do it. I still think that in person is still the gold standard because you can be there and make adjustments and all that. But the online stuff is pretty close, pretty close. Not too many gaps left if you're doing it well.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, it's just something else you're going to need to know if as your career develops. So, it's got to start some point. And I think that's the thing that, if you're resisting that, then you're resisting. It's tough to be a coach in a space where you're asking so much of clients and you're resisting these type of changes, right? That's hard. That's a lot of energy to resist.
Yeah, and you're fighting upstream at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's boil it down to some actionable items for listeners who are considering leaving a corporate job, whether it's in the fitness world or elsewhere. One, what are important questions that you should be asking?
What is my relationship with money? A great resource is The Psychology of Money. I forgot the author right now.
Let's get it. The Psychology of Money.
And what's important from that book is just like, how do you view money? What does it do for you? Are you a saver? Are you a spender? There's no wrong answer. But one thing that the author, which I'm going to get you right now, one thing you reference, which hit the nail on the head, he actually says in the book, your financial goals or your financial strategy is as unique as your fitness strategy. So there's no way anyone's strategy can ever look the same. And it's kind of silly to look at someone else's because you're never going to be the same as them.
Yeah, and then that makes total sense, right? It's like the cookie cutter workout plan only will get you so far, just like your cookie cutter financial plan is only going to get you so far.
It's only get you so far. Morgan Housel. Morgan Housel's the name. Morgan Housel, The Psychology of Money. I have it on paperbook, audiobook, and digital. My mentor recommended it to me. So that's the first thing. So you're thinking about moving, leaving jobs, yada, yada. Understand what your relationship is with money and get really clear on that. And what does it mean to you? The next thing is, what skills does your current job have? Because it's really important to know that. You're about to hire yourself into 12 different roles when you're running a business. And it's good to know who you need to staff and who you need to outsource and who would be really good for some roles. And the best way of looking at that is your current job. And then what skills you need to acquire. I think that's a really, really big one. You don't have to be a master of it, but everybody needs to get better at every single designation that's important to their business to at least know how to hire the right person to outsource or check up to make sure it's going well. So those are three things I would say, yeah.
I think too, like if you're in your career right now, maybe this is a 2-year plan or 5-year plan for you, is starting to look at those resources and network so that when you're ready to make that move, you have those people ready to go that who have your back, and things you don't know or you're not good at, you at least know someone who you can bounce the ideas off of and get you set up in the right direction. And it doesn't have to be perfect, right? This is going to be an ongoing learning scenario. You're going to have to be adaptable as you move through it. But if you have people who can help you with that, and you're willing to ask for help, is also a big thing too.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Then you'll be successful in closing the gaps on the things you're not so good at yet.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to validate. You have to validate your product. And that means exactly like you said, asking, is this useful? Is the service I give to you useful? How could it be better? And would you recommend this to a friend? If I was to offer this service, would you feel useful? What would you pay for it? Here's a price range. Validation is something I spend a lot of time doing because I always want to make sure that I'm speaking the language of the people who are my clients.
Yeah, we kind of mentioned it earlier, but I like the question too. Is asking. It's a tough question to ask, but what are you willing to sacrifice? Right? There's going to be changes. There's going to be things that you need to adjust. So what are some things that you're willing to sacrifice, drop from your regular lifestyle so that you can be successful in this new direction that you're taking?
For sure. And for how long? Because it could be temporary, right? I think the year before COVID, I walked my son to school every single day. That was a goal of mine. Wake up in the morning, get my workout in before 6, talk to my teams 6 to 7, around 7:30, get my son ready, walk him to school. You know, had a second kid, COVID, change of career. The first 12, maybe 18 months, I couldn't walk them anywhere because I
Yeah.
had to work. I had to be on Zoom, or I had to be at the gym. I had to be filling out some equipment orders. And then of recently, I just got back 1 day a week. So every Wednesday, I walk into school. By January, I'll have 2 days a week. By the end of 2022, I plan to have as many days as I want.
Perfect.
But that means for 18 months, I didn't walk him to school. And that was not okay, but it was temporary because I understood what I was giving up, what I was sacrificing.
Right. Yeah. A short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain.
You got it. We got it.
And what's some advice that when, especially with your, like, the trainers that you see on a regular basis, what's maybe like a universal advice that you're giving to them who are making this change, moving from corporate to, self-employed entrepreneur? What's something that's pretty standard that you end up giving as advice?
Local matters. Local matters. And the last 18 months, I've trained either through myself or my team, more of my family members, more of my friends, more of my neighbors than I did when I worked for a company that had over 400 clubs and national reach. And I think a big part of that, two things happened, I think. For myself personally, it was easy for me to hide in the company.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy for me to like, yeah, just go in, get a membership, talk to John, hope it goes well. Um, but now it's like, no, come into my space and meet my team and work with me. And that creates a whole nother level of intimacy between friends, family members, neighbors, and also pressure. At the end of the day, I
Mm-hmm.
want to do right by everybody. So it's caused me to up my game. And that's been cool. And the second part is like just looking at the market, looking at society. We've lost a lot of trust in big things, whether it's governments or agencies or even companies in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, everyone likes to know that, hey, the guy in the corner who serves me coffee really gives a crap about serving me coffee. And
Yeah.
the guy who's taking care of my fitness, Joe, that guy's in my corner. And we need that more than ever now that we've become detached and we're going to get more distracted. And can you serve the people around you? Simple as
People
that.
have searched out more community, right? They want to find people who they know. A lot of my clients are references. They're, from someone else. The strongest, client acquiry, I would say, is someone who has learned about you through word of mouth or is a reference because they already know what you provide. And if you provide, close interaction with you that is intimate, that is something that people are seeking out more in the last year as well.
Yeah. So to anyone who's considering that jump, like you might be looking at a spreadsheet and you're dealing with, millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars on a daily basis, or you're talking about 1,500 clients or 2,000. You need probably like anywhere between 20 to 50, really, right? Maybe even
Mm-hmm.
less depending on how your business model runs. And you're already influencing those people on a huge level. You're probably not very accessible to them until something like COVID happened, where you can do virtuals and do program design. Just
Mm-hmm.
keep remembering you're not here to compete against the Equinoxes and the Pelotons. Like, that's cool. I just read actually yesterday, Peloton and Lululemon are suing each other, which is insane, right? They're both literally filed lawsuits in New York last week. And it's like, that's for them. I just read that for entertainment. That's got nothing to do with my business strategy.
Yeah.
So I don't need to be like, oh, no one wants my services. Everyone's buying a Peloton. A lot of people are buying a Peloton. A lot of people are
Mm-hmm.
not, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people are ready to come back to a gym. A lot of people are not. A lot of people love online training. A lot of people do not. Get to work, man.
And I think it allows, in this scenario, trainers the opportunity to find their niche and really stick to it, right? If you and provide enough services that you can cover those different needs and wants, right? Someone who wants to train in person, perfect, you've got that set up. Someone who wants to train online, perfect, you got that set up. Virtual training
Yep.
set up, everything is ready to go. And now when someone comes to you and they say, I live in Dubai, but I really want to train with you, you say, perfect, right?
There
Like,
you
I'm
go.
good. I got you ready to go. If you're in my scenario, Winnipeg, or your scenario, Toronto, and they want to train in person, perfect. We got that option too. All right. So being a little bit more flexible with what you're providing has also made a big change in terms of your reach, and especially your community reach and your local reach, and also giving you now that option for more global reach, but still within your own niche, which is really cool to see.
Well said.
Perfect. It is always a pleasure talking to you. I feel like every time we chat, it's like a brainstorm. I come out of it with fresh ideas, a direction. I want to go pick up a book afterward. I want to go listen to a podcast, or I want to get my workout in. That has been that same way since day one. You always said, if you're not, you should be either earning or learning. I still do that. I still ask myself every day, how am I moving my business forward? And these are all things that I've learned from you over the years, and I hope and I know that we'll continue, learning and growing together, and affecting our communities and helping other people grow and learn too. And that's why we're here today. And
likewise, my man. Just thank you for being you. You're definitely that rookie on the team that is biting on all the veterans' heels. So just looking at you, watching it, and I know I always got to step my stuff up. So thanks for being you.
Okay, man. Appreciate you. Hope you have a great day, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Talk to you soon. Cheers.
Okay. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed the podcast, please like, share, follow, and leave a review. You can find daily workout highlights, current clients crushing it, and other great advice on Instagram at 3Phase Fitness. If you want to become a client, head to 3phasefitness.ca. On the next episode, I talked to my friend Peter Babelis about burnout, discipline, and how his military and fitness experience has developed an identity that keeps him accountable to himself, and more importantly, how you can do the same. Today's podcast has been brought to you by 3phasefitness.ca. For the best personal training options and templates to get your goals accomplished, head to 3phasefitness.ca and start the conversation to crush this year.